What's up, you guys? Welcome back. If you've been following my channel for a while, you know that I just finished a 30-day Get Good flight challenge. Now what that means is I flew every single day, all of my batteries, for 30 days straight. Now not all of them could be in person, unfortunately, due to the weather, but out of the 30, 22 of them were in person. So that's pretty good, to be honest. I'm pretty happy with that. Now the plan for today is to go over some finer details of this challenge. And we're gonna start it off with what everyone probably wants to know. What did this cost me in dollars? And what exactly did I break? So I'm gonna start off with that. I will list every single component that I broke, how many of them I broke, what each of them costs, and then a final cost at the end. And then I'll go over some of the tricks that I either learned, improved, or perfected due to this challenge. Then some other things I discovered, maybe like tech tips or general flying tips or whatever it might be. And then I'll end it with some pain points that I personally had and some thoughts for those of you that might want to do something like this in the future. I know there's been a few out there. I know Bardwell has done 2 now, I think. So I'm certainly not the first, but I think everyone's perspective is probably a little bit different. And most likely I break more shit than most people do. So entertainment for you guys, I guess, right? So without further ado, cue that intro. All right, so let's get into the fun part here. What exactly did I break and how much did it cost? Now, before I pull up the spreadsheet and I go over all the numbers, I just want to preface this whole thing by saying a lot of this was due to the nature of flying that I was doing, because I was practicing specific tricks that when you crash, they crash in a specific way, right? So for example, I was doing a lot of Matty flips. And Matty flips, you're going backwards at the end, so there's a lot of backwards crashing. And I also want to say that this goes along nicely with the theme of this channel of designing stuff better or protecting your quad better with the mechanical design. I'm not going to go into too much of that detail in this video, that's for another time, but I just think it's worth mentioning because a lot of this stuff that I broke probably could have been avoided if I took certain steps, or maybe I designed a little part to protect something a little better. I think it's just worth noting. All right, so let's get into that spreadsheet here. So first off, we have GoPro mounts. I think it was a pretty easy to spot problem for all of you watching these that I had tremendous amounts of GoPro mount problems. Now, most of this is due, as some of you probably know, to the fact that I can't print TPU pieces on my printer. And I didn't have time to get one from somewhere, like somebody else print one for me. So I was stuck making PETG mounts with the printer that I have, because that's the material that I can use. So are these numbers a little bit inflated because of that? Yes, 100%, absolutely they are. Now, in the future, it's pretty obvious that I need to do something about that. When you see that 34 there, that's a big number. That's a lot of pieces. That's more than one a day over 30 days. So you can probably get an idea of what my nights would consist of. 3D printing, replacing GoPro mounts. Luckily though, those are only 19 cents per mount. And the way I got all these printed part costs was to weigh the part and then just multiply that by the cost per gram of my 3D printing filament. I don't want to get too math heavy. That's pretty simple math though. So that's how I got the cost for all those. 34 of those, 19 cents a piece, cost me about $6.50. So this right here is why I didn't take that issue more seriously, AKA get TPU, because though it was really annoying, the cost impact really isn't that high. It's not high enough to justify me getting a TPU part overnight printed or anything like that. You know what I mean? Like, it's just a cost benefit thing, and it's just not worth it for this challenge. And moving on here, we got the GoPro cases. And like the mounts, these were PETG. And I thought that would be a bigger issue than it was. And it really didn't start being an issue until the very end of the challenge, when I was flying a little bit more on like concrete and asphalt and like brick and that type of thing. But it wasn't as big of an issue as I thought. Now those ones are quite a bit more expensive at 71 cents per piece, but it's still, again, not that big of an issue in terms of cost. Now a big one here is propellers. And anyone that flies knows this is a problem, and if you're grinding tricks and going hard every day, you're gonna break propellers. So this came as no surprise to me. I don't know that there's much I could have done to avoid this, because I didn't want to put like a duct around it, and even if I did, who's to say that wouldn't break? And then now you got another piece to repair. So that's not the biggest surprise to me. 24 of them, I mean, it seems fairly reasonable for a final cost of a little bit under 20 bucks. Moving on here, we got arm protectors, and those were the little pieces that fit on the arms of the quads to protect the carbon fiber and give the motor a little bit more shielding, if you will. Again, that's not a surprise, just like some of these other parts on here, because they are on there specifically to get damaged. That's their purpose. So I'm not really too surprised on that. And some of the stuff I was doing at the end of the challenge too, like the grinding, obviously those are going to wear down the arm protectors because you're literally grinding them off. So that's not too much of a surprise. That was only a little over $3. Now the big expensive ones here, coming up next here, we got the VTX and the batteries. Those obviously are the pricey parts of this. And in the case of the VTXs, all three of them broke in the same way. The little connector piece ripped right off the board and took the traces with it. Now normally, if it just popped the connector off, I would just solder it back onto the trace, but if there's no trace to solder on, you can't really do anything. Unfortunately, that meant I had to buy new ones, and 3 of them in this case. That was a high dollar item at $105 just for those over this 30-day challenge. And the batteries, that's not really that big of a surprise either. I'm pushing these things really hard every single day. They're running into stuff, and sometimes they get chopped up by the propeller if they eject off the quad, or maybe they hit a twig. They take a lot of abuse. I'm not really that surprised or upset about the battery thing. It is what it is. Then we got the straps. I think that all 4 of those were race day quad straps, and you guys know how I feel about those. I hate the damn things. They suck so bad. The only reason I use them is because they're free when you order something from Race Day Quads. So though they suck, they're free. So again, we got the cost benefit thing here of, is it worth paying, I don't even know, like what, 15, 20 bucks for good Lumenier straps when I can just get Race Day Quads ones for free? No, not for this challenge, if you ask me. One ND filter. So these were the lens skins ones that I had. I did a review on these too, and this is completely my fault. I knew the risk going into this. I was flying in a really compact, wooded area with pretty terrible visibility because the leaves are starting to drop and it was all like twigs and sticks everywhere. That one's on me. I'm not mad about that. That is in no way a reflection of the part itself or the company. That was just my decision to take that risk. But that being said, those are not cheap. It was, what do I have here? Like 50 something, $52 for the set of 4, which means the one is $13. It's not cheap. So next time, if I want to get ND freestyle footage, I need to build some sort of protective housing around the filter. Something maybe like a polycarbonate sheet or something to protect that filter, because those things are extremely fragile. But again, that's not on the company. That's kind of just how those things are, to be honest. Moving on, we got an antenna mount, and that was just the thing that held the antenna coming from the VTX on the quad. and that's mounted in the back, so of course that's going to take a lot of hits when you're doing Matty flips. Not that big of a surprise, that's cheap. Power leads, so those are the wires with the XT60s coming off them from the ESC on the quads. That's not too surprising either, considering the clearance from those wires to the propellers is usually very, very small. It only takes a little crash to dislodge them slightly from where it had them secured on the strap. And then now they can get it cut up by the prop. Same thing with the balance plug. Same type of situation. And finally, we got the GoPro screen here. Now, I didn't include this on the total because it didn't break the GoPro, and I wouldn't replace just the screen, if that makes sense. I'm still going to use my GoPro until I can't anymore, but as of right now, I can. So I'm not really going to count that in the total, but if I were to count it, it'd be $300 for the GoPro. Now you can get into like the Best Buy Geek Squad protection program, how much that costs, but I'm trying to do this in a like true cost situation, not all the Geek Squad stuff. So true cost of the GoPro Hero 8 Black is about $300. That's the cost I went with. So at the bottom, you can see, again, without the GoPro, this cost me about $220 to do this for 30 days. Now, most of that, obviously, as you can see, is coming from the VTXs and the batteries. And I think maybe I couldn't do a whole lot to protect the battery, but I think I could have done a little bit better to protect the VTX, because all three of those that I broke were on the QAV. And the QAV, coincidentally, was the quad that had the antenna mount break. But instead of replacing it, I just taped it for the rest of the challenge because I didn't want to print another one. I didn't want to deal with it. So because it wasn't being held as rigid, now that transferred all that force and deflection up to the board where the antenna was mounted. So I do think that I could have helped the odds there for the VTX failing a little bit more, but I have a feeling I would have broken at least one anyways, just due to the nature of how I was crashing. But all in all, $222 for 30 days of just grinding tricks and just going hard. I don't think that's that bad, honestly. I did have that scare with my Taranis like 4 days before the challenge was over. That would have sucked, but luckily there was just some crap in the gimbal and it wasn't a big deal. But that would have been another decent chunk of money. Now let's talk about some of the tricks that I learned or perfected during this challenge. First of all, of course, we got the Matty flips. That was the #1 focus of this. That's a big reason why I wanted to do this challenge in the first place, because I didn't know how to do those, or at least I wasn't comfortable with the motion yet, or I wasn't comfortable with the idea of crashing yet. So Matty flips are #1. The second one that I really improved, I think, is the juicy flicks. Now, you probably noticed that I do quite a few of these in my freestyle edits, and I have vastly improved my skills with them during this 30-day period. So I'm pretty happy about that. That's one of my favorite tricks. It's so good to incorporate if you're trying to go from one location to another. Maybe you're in like an open field or there's not really cool like proximity obstacles around. They're a great way to depict that travel move in a cooler way. It just looks better than flying straight there. So I'm happy I got so much practice with those, and I think they look a lot better now. Now the third thing I want to throw on there is power loops. I wasn't really practicing these specifically, but I did happen to do a lot of them in the process, and I do think I've gotten a lot cleaner with them. I used to be one of those people that just went way too high, and then I didn't really get the backwards momentum. But I think something with practicing all the Matty flips made me realize like when I need to put the throttle on, and I think it improved my skill in making it more of a circular motion instead of like a long elliptical one, if that makes sense. So I think those improved too. Next thing is the trippy spin. I haven't done a whole lot of these, but I do have a couple videos where I have a few trippy spins in there. I'm really happy I got those down because I actually was trying to learn that trick earlier in the summer, but I didn't really do it as much as I wanted to. I didn't practice as hard as I wanted to, but I was able to do it a little bit during the challenge, and I do have some flight footage now with those in a line, and they look really nice. Next one is grinds. Now these didn't get introduced until like the very end of the challenge. I just happened to, I think I was just low on throttle and happened to just skim across the ground, but then I made a whole video on it because I think it's a cool new trick that you can throw into your routine if it's getting a little stale. It's just something that it doesn't seem like it would work with something that flies, and I think that's what makes it cool. It's kind of like a skateboard grind. This whole hobby kind of reminds me of the whole skateboarding culture of trying to do a trick and, you know, then your friends have to do the trick. It's kind of like that. So I think that's a really cool thing to incorporate into it, and I'm really glad I did a video on that. And the last two here that I'm going to talk about for this challenge is the wall rides, like Johnny FPV, and then because I don't know what they're actually called, I'm going to call them Immelmatties. So here's a little DVR clip of what an Immelmattie is. I don't know if that's actually what it's called, but that's just what I've started calling them. So I don't know, maybe I can take credit for that. Hey, that was a good one. I could have actually linked that to a line. But it's a really cool move. I've always wanted to know how to do it. PDevX, if you've ever seen his videos, he is great at them. He goes to these cool like school locations where they got a bunch of like catwalk, skyway type stuff, and he'll just do these tricks around them, and they look incredible. That's how I got the idea for these. And one of my favorite tricks, and I want to get better at these. I only started practicing them at the very end of the challenge. They're going to be my next focus. That's going to be the next trick that I try to learn because I love those. I think they look super cool, and I think I could make some awesome edits when I get good at those. As far as the wall rides, due to where I live, there's not really many like skyscrapers that I can practice those on, but the good thing about them is you can practice them on pretty much anything. And in my case, that was typically like a line of trees that usually look pretty good. And there's a few different flavors of wall rides, if you will. There's one where you just kind of go up and then yaw towards the ground and like spin around and look at the wall. And there's also one where you like kick it back looking up instead. And I was practicing the latter. I think those are cooler. That's a reverse wall ride, by the way. Both of those are reverse wall rides. I just don't think normal forward wall rides are that cool, honestly. I mean, they're pretty easy to do, and I don't know. I just didn't think it was worth making those a focus of a 30-day challenge. But I do think I improved on them. There are a few of them in a couple of the freestyle edits I made. And again, they're not on buildings, they are on trees. Let's talk about some things that I discovered from this challenge. First of all, when I started this, I was using weird connectors called Sermos connectors, and nobody uses those. Like, nobody I've ever met has ever used those. I was like the odd man out using this weird connector. I did make the switch to XT60, and that's when I realized I should have done that a long time ago. Second thing is the GoPro mounts. Now, I kind of knew this already. I knew this was going to be an issue with the TPU versus the PETG material that I have. I knew that was going to be a problem. But I guess I just didn't realize how big of a problem it was until, I was breaking more than one a day. And I know part of it is because of the style of flying that I was doing. If I were taking it a little bit easier and just maybe cruising more, it's fine. It's not really an issue. The only time it becomes an issue is when you're crashing a lot, and at this challenge I was crashing a whole lot. So if I do this again, I will be getting TPU. Arm protectors. This is another one I knew, because I feel like it's, pretty obvious. You want to protect the arms because they can get cut up or smashed in the event of a crash. And they did, and I guess I just didn't realize how important they really would be. But in the end, I broke 21 of them, as you saw from the other segment. And that was another exercise in printing every single night for hours and hours and hours. It was just a pain. So if you don't use arm protectors, I highly recommend doing that, because if I wasn't smashing those up, I'd be smashing my carbon frame, and that's a whole lot more expensive than just printing a little piece to throw in the arm. So if you're gonna do a challenge like this, get arm protectors, trust me. Now the straps. You guys know my feelings about these stupid race day quad straps. They're so terrible. But to be honest, if you're doing a challenge like this and you're going pretty hard, you could do worse than them. I mean, they're free, they're durable enough for a few flights. They'd last, I think I said, like a week of continued use. And they suck, but they'll get the job done. And for me, that was the most important thing. When I'm spending my nights dicking around with GoPro mounts and other crap like arm protectors, I don't have time to be ordering and waiting for new good straps. So I just use the crappy ones. Not saying they're good, just saying they're free. And I also uncovered better ways to mount a VTX. I used to be the person that would mount VTXs on the back like most people, but I would have my connector port facing left or right off like the side of the quad. And again, for normal flying, that's probably fine. But because I was crashing a lot, and because most of my crashing was going backwards due to the Matty flips, it was putting a lot of strain on the connectors on the VTXs, and that is why they broke. So I learned that by putting the connector facing like forward, like through the quad, that shielded it a lot more. So now nothing can get in there and like poke at it or pry at it. But I still did manage to break them because of all the crashing and the wrenching on that connector. Eventually it's gonna break, but I did learn to just mount it forward. It offers a little bit better protection, so you're not getting the stupid breaks. You'll get some breaks, you just won't get the stupid ones. That's my philosophy. Now, the last thing, I want to give a shout out to GoPro, because their cameras are almost indestructible. You guys have seen how many crashes I have had over this challenge. I've actually started making crash compilation videos too, because there's just so much carnage and hard crashes and just tumbling and rolling and falling from heights, and it's insane what these things go through. It really is. So to show you guys how invincible these things are, this is what my GoPro looks like at the end of the challenge. The back screen is just completely obliterated, and the front actually looks pretty good, but the thing is just all cut up. It's smashed in the back there. You can actually see, I think that's the battery right there, that little copper looking thing. The crazy part is it turns on and the screen still shows stuff. How incredible is that? GoPro makes an almost invincible product. I'm very impressed with the durability of these things. I thought going into this that would be one of the weak points of the challenge, and it would be obviously very expensive to replace those, especially more than once. But I'm shocked. This thing has lasted me the whole challenge. I've only used one. That's incredible to me. So shout out to them. You guys make a great product. Your swivel mount is trash. Please change it. So what about some pain points that I had during this challenge? The number one thing above all else is the repairing and the maintenance. The flying, yeah, it's a lot of work and it is a lot of time to try and carve out of your day every single day. But by far, the biggest challenge is the repairing. I'm serious, guys. You go home and you have God knows how many broken things. And in my case, I'm breaking at least one GoPro mount every single time I fly. I did get smart at the end with the duct tape there. It held it together pretty well, but it's a ton of work to keep these things flying as hard as I was trying to fly them for 30 days in a row. I do have 2 quads now, and I think without those quads, I would be screwed. If I just had one, there's no way I could have done this for 30 days. Because sometimes one is like beyond quick repair or, whatever. So now you have another one. It's just nice to have more than one quad with you, like in the field, so you're not just done if you crash really hard at some point. So along with the repairing is the actual flying aspect. I know I mentioned it briefly a little bit ago, but it is really fun, don't get me wrong, but just finding a time in your day, we're all busy, and finding that time in your day to go fly, it's a lot. It's a lot of work. It takes a lot of dedication. And for me, I was like doing the vlogs while I'm flying, and I'm doing like 8 batteries every single time. So I was out there for like 2 or 3 hours, like every day. That's a lot of time. That's a very big time commitment. It's just hard to fit that into your schedule. And it's not like I'm a 10-year-old kid and I don't have any like job or anything to go to. It's just hard to fit that in the schedule. And lastly, on the major pain points is the video editing. Now, I really do love this part. That's one of my favorite things about this, but it takes time. Just like the actual flying and the maintenance, it just takes a large chunk of time to do it, much less do it well. Hours and hours and hours of sitting in front of a computer, reviewing footage or mixing and matching audio or whatever, and editing it to look decent to you guys. It's a lot of work. It's fun, but it's a lot of work. All right, so what are some thoughts I have for you guys that might wish to do one of these challenges on your own? Well, I think if you have a specific trick in mind, or maybe you just want to get to that next level of ability, I think this is a great thing to do. That's kind of where I was. I had the Matty flips in mind, just general like backwards flight, and I just felt like I was stagnating at my current, or I guess former skill level. I wasn't really improving like I wanted to. And to improve in anything, you really do just have to grind. You just got to put the time in. There's really no other way to do it. If you can't get out there and actually fly, do the simulator. It's not perfect, it's not exactly the same, but it's really the best you can do if you can't like physically fly in person. So I only had to do that 8 days. I'm lucky. I had pretty good weather for the whole thing, but I would say if you're at a point that you're stagnant, this is a good thing to do. It'll break you out of the mold. It'll force you to be creative with repairs and time management, and you'll probably think of new tricks along the way too. It's really good if you're in that situation. Another potential situation I have in mind is maybe you just built a quad, or maybe you just designed one of your own. I don't know how many people in my audience would be in that situation, but I know that if I were to design a quad from scratch, like I used to do the 3D printed ones and that type of thing, if I had designed and built my own, this would be a great test for it, for the general durability and performance and, any other random issues that you might not even know about. This type of challenge is a perfect stress test for that. Or, really for any gear that you have that you're not sure about. This challenge, it's so intense and it's so long. There's a lot of things that can go wrong, and that's what makes it the perfect test environment. So if your situation fits one of those 3 things I described, I think you should absolutely consider doing this challenge. For me, it was kind of a mixture between those scenarios, honestly. There was a lot of different things that went into making me want to do this, and I do think I got a lot out of it. I'm happy I did it. I feel like I'm a much better pilot. I hope you guys can tell from the flight videos, but it was a lot of fun. So if you have the determination, that's probably the biggest thing. You got to be determined. If you have the time, you have the determination, and you just want to get better, or you want to test it, or whatever, I think this is a great thing to do. All right, you guys. Well, I hope you got something out of that. I hope you at least got a laugh if you didn't learn anything. And I hope I provided some insight to if you should do this or not, if you're kind of on the fence. But anyways, thanks for following along this whole journey. It's been a long one. It's been very tiring. It's been a lot of work, but it's been a blast. I really appreciate you guys following along. And if you like this video, if you like the challenge, if you like my channel, what I'm all about, please consider dropping me a like down below. Feel free to leave me a comment, and I would really appreciate it if you'd hit that subscribe button. Thanks for watching.